Hey, what's going on? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger. And on today's episode, we are going to be getting some answers on when we might be wanting to use NgRx in our Angular applications and some tips on how to improve user experience if we use that as well. We actually have a guest that's part of the NgRx team, so that'll be pretty cool. But before we get into that, I want to tell everybody about an upcoming conference that's coming in, NGDE, that's Delta Echo, if I've got my call signs right. It's the Angular conference in Berlin. This conference is pretty cool. It's a nonprofit conference, so every penny that they earn is spent on sponsoring local meetups in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, as well as stuff like travel and food and stuff like that. It looks like they're going to have about 30 speakers and trainers. It's a 2-day conference. There's a workshop the day before as well, or a couple workshops the day before. There's a workshop day right before, right? Tickets are available. It's August 30th and 31st of this year. So it's right around the corner. Check that out. I believe we have a discount code for it as well. So I'll throw the link to that in the description for this episode after we're done, so people can click on that and check that out. But yes, definitely give that a check. I believe the URL is ng-de.org. Again, I'll plug that in the description as well. So check that conference out.
Shout out to Chaos Monster in Berlin.
Yeah. All of our friends over there for sure.
And Dominic Elm too, I think, is near brother. Dominic is going to be, I think, hopefully there. Isn't he coming on here soon?
Yeah, he's going to be on an episode here coming up. So that'll be cool. Yeah, I think Dominic, Manfred, David. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are doing the workshops as well there. So
yes,
it'd be pretty cool. Definitely check that conference out. So we want to give a shout out to there. And again, we'll have some links in the description, so you can get some discount code and find out more about that conference for sure. For sure. All right, let's get into it. Let's say hi to our panelists, then we'll say hi to our guest, and we'll get things rolling. Joining us today, so happy to have Alyssa Nykel back with us. Alyssa, how's it going?
I'm so glad to be back and so excited for today's guest. Woo!
Awesome. We missed you. The world missed you. The internet's missed you. All of our viewers missed you, I'm sure. So we're happy to have you back. Mike Brocky, what's going on, Mike?
Not too much, just hanging out. I'm glad you called me by my original name and not my conference name.
Your future conference name?
My future conference name.
Yeah.
What's the wait? What's the future conference name? I missed this.
Oh, Justin and I are having a little fun with our talk. So.
Oh, you got for your Denver talk.
Tell us what's I am Mike Brockenberger. It's happening.
It's kind of like if we went into this like Atom Collider and got mixed up and had part me and part Brocky. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy.
I'm loving it.
Bonnie, what's going on, Bonnie?
I'm really excited. I mean, I'm always excited for this show. I love this show, but Alyssa's back and she's glowing and she looks so beautiful, and we missed Alyssa so much. And also, I'm very excited about this guest, and I always say that, but this one is so Samantha actually told me about him. And she was very excited about him because she said he's a lot of fun. He's like fun, like on a like Mike Brocky level fun, right? And I was trying to figure out how to say his name because it's complicated. And she said the trick is, right, it's Alex Okrushko, but there's a crush right in the middle of it. So every time Samantha says it, she says it really loud, Alex Okrushko. And she gets so excited, and I don't know why, but it's fun. So I told her that he was going to be on the show today, and you know what she said to me? Alex Okrushko! So I would really like to introduce Alex Okrushko!
Woo!
And he's really a lot of fun, so that's why I get away with picking on him.
Yeah, usually my name is not that exciting, but I guess when Samantha puts it that way, it's Okrushko.
I can't hear it any other way. Like it's and she always it's always loud, Alex. Like she's always so excited. Yeah. Because you're a lot of fun, really. Don't let it go to your head.
Awesome. All right. Well, Alex, do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself for those that might not know who you are?
Yeah. So hey, as Bonnie already introduced, Alex Okrushko. I'm currently a software engineer at Google. for the last 3 years, I've been working on Firebase team on the console itself. So I'm very deep into the Angular world or AngularJS to Angular migrations as well. That was core to our progress that we've been doing over the last 3 years. I was recently announced that ngConf is here to officially join the NgRx team, which I was super excited about. I'm maintaining ngRx library within Google itself, and what it means is you might have heard that Google uses like the monorepo kind of design of that, but that also means that all the third-party stuff is synced into the monorepo. We don't deal with npm. That means that somebody has to sync that code, and that means that all the projects at Google that use ngRx, for example, it's over 180 projects right now. I have to make sure that they're not broken because they use all that code as well. And I'm also, I'd say, an active member of the Angular in Depth as well. I'm the author of a number of articles, but I also help review some of the other articles in our Slack community of authors who write there and contribute there, or who want to contribute, so provide some help in that sense. So yeah, that's about me, I guess.
That is a full plate. Do you ever have time to sleep or do anything else, or what?
No, because
yeah,
he still has to do conference talks too, aren't you? So you were just at Vikings. I just saw you, and then now you're going to NGMI.
Yes, and in between, I was at Angular in Depth Conf in Ukraine as well. Yeah, and I actually took part. So this one I wasn't presenting, but I attended the Smashing Conf in Toronto, which was really exciting for me as well. It was something outside of the Angular community. It was interesting. So yeah,
you're racking up those frequent flyer miles.
Yeah, it was a little bit busy. It'll be a little bit less busy further down until probably November. I'll be in NG Poland and NG Talks in Ukraine, which I'm extremely excited about, both of those. Yeah,
I am supposed to be at both of those as well. Hopefully,
oh,
I will
that's
see
awesome.
you there. Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to fit it all in, but I can't. It's getting worse and worse. Like you make so many friends at these conferences, and then you get the fear of missing out. And so I want to go to all of them if possible, but it's not possible.
Yes, my role is still in the software engineering. So I actually have to do the work as well, which my manager expects me to. So it's not only conferences. It just happened that a lot of them fell into the short span of time, and I deferred the other two all the way to November. Yeah.
Speaking of doing the work, what are you going to show us?
Oh, so when I started working with ngRx, I got really excited about it. Right, it was an amazing technology. It was really solving my problem that my first assignment in Firebase. This is where I got myself familiar with the technology. I was tasked with working on in-console notifications, so messages, red dot pulsing when there are new ones. There are some urgent alerts that show up right away. You can dismiss them. You can, play different pages with them. So it was a lot of interactions with a lot of things, and we had a periodic polling every so often. So you had to merge those events. So there's user events, there are server events, and I was looking, what's the best way to solve it currently? That was 3 years ago, and this is exactly where I learned of this ngRx thing that was getting some traction outside. And that time I saw that Rob Walmart was involved with this, and he joined Google as well. Oh, hey, Rob, what's the deal here? So this is how I got involved with the project. But ever since the project got a lot more popular and more and more and more popular, to the point, again, we were the first project at Google to use it, like Firebase, and now we have 180 projects Angular projects in Google using it. So externally, it's also got very popular, right? But with the popularity comes the other like drawbacks of it, of the popularity, right? It's the hype that it creates. I talked I'm going to talk actually in Malaysia as well about it, about the something that's called like the Gartner hype cycle, and it shows the graph that goes, as technology becomes very popular, it shoots up way above, and then there's some dissatisfaction with it because it's not, for example, for all of the problems to solve, and people start piling up on this, saying, well, maybe you shouldn't be using it, and it's true, you shouldn't be using it for all of it, right? So the popularity starts to go a little bit down. There's more of like a not so quite positive sentiment towards the technologies, and then it sort of bottoms out and evens out because people see where there are actual use cases for it, for NgRx, for state management, like library like this. And this hype cycle, it's not something unique to NgRx. It happens with any technology that starts growing in popularity a lot. I give examples usually, like NoSQL databases. They're like, oh, this is the new thing now. It has to be everywhere, or like microservices. Like, oh, we just dropped the servers now. We just need microservices, and we're all great and good. Forget about the rest. This is a new cool thing. So with any technology, it has those hype cycles, but eventually, people realize where the actual value of those are and start adjusting to those use cases. So NgRx is no different in this sense, and that's why I typically talk about, and within Google is the same problem, right? Like people are like, well, should I use it? Should I not use it? Frequently in Google, people ask these questions, and even more in Firebase itself, right? As a team, we have a large team of developers who work on the front end itself. Those questions come up, right? Like, do we need it? We actually had to reevaluate the technology after a year and a half of using it, right? I was in charge of it, so I collect all the feedback from all the product teams, how they feel about it, where do they feel it helps them, where do they feel it slows them down, and the responses were not all even as well, right? Somebody said, well, for my product feature, I thought that was an overkill. I probably would have been a lot better with just pure service-based approach. And some teams like, oh, this really helped solve our problems where we needed multiple data in multiple transformations in different parts of the app where user can interact with this. So in the end, we decided as a team that we would use it where it makes sense, with a tendency towards erring on the side of using it versus not using it. But externally, not all the projects are Firebase console size projects. Which also brings their own challenges and their use cases. So this is what I typically,
The whole that whole like hype cycle concept, right, where it comes into play, it's really interesting that we find ourselves getting into that, right? And like you mentioned, it's not just NgRx, it's whatever, right? I think a lot of it, we go and we say, okay, look, we need to design or build something. So we need a solution. So what are we going to do? We're going to go out there and look for articles and information that kind of helps guide us to that, right? And a lot of times those articles or information may be subjected to that hype cycle, right? And so now they're plugging something, and so it becomes like we need to think as engineers going into a solution, okay, let me evaluate that and take that into consideration as I read this content, right? And then I wonder how much onus on the content creators we should be putting or thinking if we're content creators about writing an article when we describe using this to like clarify, and help maybe that conversation about this is the way to do this, but vet it and evaluate it whether it fits your scenario, right? Because those two kind of start blurring together, and then we find ourselves, just like you're saying, in this period where we may get frustrated, like this is too much or this sort of thing. We get mad at it, right? And it's because those two things blur together, I think. I don't know.
Yes, definitely. And that actually, after things like the retrospective that we did on this, we start to look for things, how we can improve things, right? And the many of the improvements in the NgRx version 8 came about because somebody on the Firebase team said, well, why won't we try to optimize the new feature and try to use new features of TypeScript where we can, do it with a little bit less of code, still the same principles, but just less of code. And we started looking into it, going over things, and this is how we sort of discovered Nicholas Jameson library that was written like a year ago, and it was like, wow, that's actually solves a lot of the problems there, and the APIs that we were iterating over towards, which was fun. So yeah, Nicholas said we had. He's one of the writers as well at Angular in Depth, so we had a lot of conversations with him about this, and eventually we ended up merging or modifying, transforming most of his TS action library into a new NgRx. That's how you get the new create action things or the new create reducer. So which I feel improve developer ergonomics by a mile, and I got a lot of positive feedback with this. It sometimes could be a little bit strange at first, right? And then you get used to it, and you really enjoy it. I couldn't force myself. It took some time to merge it into Google because there were other breaking changes. So it took me almost a month to merge it in, almost 70 PRs to get close to it, plus the big merge itself. So it was, again, major undertaking in my sort of free time, 20% time within Google. Because again, I have conferences, I have other stuff to do as well. I have my work. Yeah.
That question about like, should we use NgRx, right? It's like, can we get a definitive answer on that? And is some of that leveraged in this concept of, well, what does it take to do it? And like the stuff you're mentioning in terms of the latest version that helps make that a little bit easier, less code that we need to do to use it. Is that a key factor in when we make the decision to do it? Or is there some other kind of one or two key metrics we say, well, look, this is why we would want to use NgRx over maybe rolling our own or something simpler? Like how would somebody, how can we pose that as an answer to somebody who has that question, right?
I can do a quick present parts of my slides that I recently did at Angular in Depth, where I was trying to prepare for this specific question. Let me try to present it, and I'll talk through it as well.
Yeah. As you're bringing that up, it's a really interesting question because the real answer is it depends.
Exactly.
But I think that at the same time, you can come up with some general rules to help with the decision-making process.
Let me see, just a slideshow. Which screen do you see? You see this one, I guess, right? There's my mouse. Here's my mouse. All right. There it is. Okay, I'll just do it this way because it'll be a little bit easier, because otherwise it takes over all my 3 screens. I'll just quickly go over it. So again, yeah, where to use it or not to use it, right? And the thing that I when I was preparing this is NgRx is a state management library, right? Do you see my slides? Right now.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So it's a state management library, but what's the state? What are we trying to manage, right? That's I think this has to be the first question that has to be answered. And I always spend a lot of time trying to understand or formulate what exactly the state is, and the closest and the best, I guess, to what I liked was Victor Sufkin's article from a year ago, so where he broke down what exactly the states are. The server state, right, the one that's is on the server. The persistent state, this is when we sort of type in the URL, and we get the data, the part of the server state. There's also client state. So for example, if we, I don't know, select a project here, for example, or in a drop down, and we make it part of the URL, it's not persisted to the server. So server in the database, it doesn't know where we see, but it's part of the client state. There are URL states, and URL states quite important, right? Because this should be like a source of truth for the entire state. Local UI state, this is nothing persisted, neither changed because of the URL, or like, for example, like a state of a drop down, right? Is it open? Is it closed? Application doesn't have any general knowledge about it, except for that particular local UI state or local component state as well, sometimes called. This browser state, which we won't talk right now, and transient state as well. So again, there's a lot of state that we manage, and the key part where libraries like NgRx, or even when you use the server-based approach, they play in trying to synchronize this for states. So the server state, the persistent state that partially represents the server state, and the synchronization process between them, right? For example, if we change something in the app, for example, we choose something, right? And we need to persist it to the server. Do we show it right away in the UI, or do we wait until we send it to the server and get a response back and only then show it, right? So this is the whole synchronization process between. And again, URL sort of drives this, but sometimes when we act in the app, we push to the URL our new states as well, right, through the router and the client state. So those four, the synchronization between those four is the main problem, right? We can completely get rid of all of the state and have stateless services, and that means that any action that we do on the app will wait for server to respond, and we wait for it. We don't cache anything. But this would be
in that solution, would that even work offline?
It won't work offline, but it would be, even with online solution, would be very junky experience for the user. This is what the first, when the Ajax got around, so we didn't have to, reload the page every time, but we can do asynchronous actions. This is what the experience was, right? There's no optimistic, there's no cache data, nothing like that. So we can go that, and then we definitely don't need any state management solutions, and no synchronization bugs. It'll be very easy to work with. But again, the user experience would be poor at best. And then there's another solution is a stateful services, right? The ones that have cache, the ones that share that data from one page to another. For example, we have a list of products. We click on this. We show some details of another product already. So it becomes a lot friendlier UI experience. And this is great. And this is, for example, what Firebase Console was 3 years ago when we were on the AngularJS only, right? But in my experience in the large apps, that leads to something like that. Component talks to service, that service talks to other service. It states that cache, source of truth starts to spread out among services. Different services use different services, and it spreads to multi layers. I'm not proud of it, but for example, we had one 7-layer deep services. And funny enough, there was one service that was injected in every single layer of those.
How does that work? Like, so you're saying 7 layers deep, like,
yes,
like
so
7,
service that uses, the component that uses, that had a number of services injected. One of those services has a number of services injected. Another one of those services had another, and then you can go 7 layers deep into it. And it's not that something maliciously or on purpose does the bad design. Things grow organically, right? For example, Firebase Console was and keeps developing over years with a big number of engineers.
Was it like a performance thing that what made you realize, like, to look at the tree of like how deep did it go, or did you just realize one day, like, you looked up and you're like, this thing is 7 layers deep?
I think we should blame it on David East.
He is a saint. Don't you dare.
No, that's why we have to blame it on him. I think he did this to torture us.
Yeah, no, don't blame it on David East. David East is an awesome guy.
I'm just kidding. We love you, David.
Yeah, so David actually was working on Angular Fire, I think, at some point. Yeah. And then a little bit on the console, he was on software engineer rotation for half a year, where he had to experience everything we wrote. Yeah, so this is something that I would typically call a service soup, and again, this is just the organic growth of the app. I need to add this functionality somewhere. Well, this service is already injected in that service. Well, I'll just throw another method on that service. So it becomes very hard, right, to work with this. So this is the examples where solutions like ngRx start to work, because how they organize things. And again, one of the things that we have stateful services is we would have a behavior subject underneath and work with that. But
and a bag of California finest. I wonder
that's
I know. Is it like a bag of carrots or something?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Well, it's Rob we're talking about.
Yes. So and
not
this
carrots?
is what I wanted to highlight. Yes, this is what I wanted to highlight, that the first version of ngRx was actually written within 1 weekend, right? It was like 70 lines of code. It was basically a behavior subject that was almost like, you would write a proper stateful services today.
This tweet explains so much.
Yes. Yeah, for the people who cannot see it, it's the Rob Walmer's tweet where he explained how the first version of ngRx got created. After Dan Abramov's Build a Redux video course.
But like you're saying, like the point there that's great about it is like, okay, this starts the solution for state management, right?
That's right.
And it is a good example that shows that it can start simple and then it can grow, right?
It can grow. It can grow for more and more of the use cases. Well, what I want to say definitely is that if your component doesn't have many services it depends on, if your source of truth for that particular set of components, doesn't spread to many services, with cache, say, I don't know, it could be 3, 5, and it's manageable, and you're fine with that, you're more comfortable with that. So don't use ngRx for that. Use your stateful services, or some of them could be stateless, right? So it's completely fine to use it. It's when it starts to grow beyond that, or you expect it to grow beyond that, what your application might look like, right? What the scope could be. So definitely start using ngRx where you actually need it.
And one thing I want to clarify is that this whole conversation about whether or not you need ngRx isn't just applicable to ngRx, right? It's applicable to any dependency that you're pulling in. Before you pull in any dependency, you should evaluate what is it saving me? What is it bringing to my application, to my project, that I may or may not be getting from just rolling my own or doing it my own? Is it enough of a savings of time and effort and complexity to pull in an additional dependency, not just specifically with ngRx, but with any dependency you're pulling in?
100% agree with you. You can say better. And even within your application, if you have ngRx that you use in certain places, if you have a set of components that would be talking to a set of services, to specific endpoints that don't need to, involve entire state management with it, it's fine to use services there. It's completely fine, right? So it's not always ngRx or nothing. They can coexist together.
ngAir
one of the
sparingly.
Yes,
I always
exactly.
say it's supposed to be like a sports car, not a pickup truck.
Yes, it could be. Well, yes, it could be many things, right? Yes, but one of the other frequent questions that I get is within Google internal users that are using, like, how can we, how can I touch my ngRx to the forms, right? And my typical reaction to that is, why would you need it, right? Like, do you really need it? Do you, when you do the input within the form, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to send it right away request, and does the rest of the application need to know about it? Most likely no. So
this is such an important topic. This is like, this is so important because I see this so much where people get excited that like ngRx, all the cool kids are using it, right? And it's like so popular and people want to use it, but then they get carried away and start doing everything. Every interaction with the user creates an ngRx action. And that's really, I think, part of the problem where we get all this boilerplate, because if you're doing CRUD, if you're updating the server, then yeah, fire an action, but every mouse click should not.
Yes.
Well, it's what
For
goes
example,
too, right? Like, what are we putting in? And I think with the forms and stuff like that, is thinking about, does that need to be in the state? Because like you're saying, like, does it need to be shared? How does it need to be used across the app in other components, right? Where you can't flow it through an input or output, right? So you use the state to get it there. But is that something that needs to get it there that way, like direct input through those form components? Or is it something that you say, here, I've collected all the data in this component, I send it off, and then it does it, right?
That's exactly right. And for example, I mentioned the local component state. Form control is a perfect holder for local control state. This is what your form inputs are stored in, and it's a perfect thing for it. So maybe once you're done with form and you send to create the form, send it, and then it would be needed throughout the rest of the application. Then it's okay to send the action, right? But even talking to services within, you need, for example, do async request, validation requests, right, to your backend from the form, right, like some kind of field validation. And again, you need a service, but it's completely fine to bypass any ngRx. You just do the service, get the response back, async validation to your form, and you're good there.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that's a spot where there becomes confusion, right? And it's quick to get stuff into your state that you maybe not want, right? And the validation is exact example, right? We got a form that we got form controls, and we're collecting that information, and we want to validate it, right? And then we want to show an error if it's not valid. Well, that's like local component state to do all those decisions, like you said, and that's just call service inside of there. We don't necessarily need to say like the form is loading and the form is invalid into our global state to handle that. Component state can probably handle all that. And then when that's all validated, then we maybe want to share that with the global state if it's needed to display somewhere else, right? And I think that's, people start thinking, oh, I've got ngRx, I've got these actions. I quickly go lead myself to, well, I'll stick a is loading, I'll stick a has form error into my global state. And now you've coupled all that stuff together and it becomes challenging, right? And it's like stepping back from that for a minute and thinking about what goes in global state versus local state.
That's exactly right. Yeah, ngRx is, again, it should be for managing those four states, right? And local component state is not part of that. So this is how I view it. This is how I recommend it. And don't get me wrong, I was, when I started using the framework, I was also like ngRx, all the things, right? So definitely you get excited, right? It works. It works for so many things. But it takes, I guess, practice and learning by example, or running into some issues and general group discussions. It's very nice where the team that you work with also has the feedback and the opinions. This is, and when they are discussed in a friendly, argumentative manner, it's the best kind of discussions. I love those, because then you come both sides learn in that. And the other one was, shared components. Should we use NgRx and shared components? Well, the answer is there, most likely no again, right? Those should be, use communicating with the outside. You should be even using services inside them. There's always a but. But in most cases, in 95% of the cases, no, right? They should be communicating with inputs and outputs to their container components. So there are a number of cases where I can definitively say, say no, don't use NgRx there, and some cases where I would say, well, maybe you should, such as many services talking to each other, or things that happen at the same time. It could happen multiple things happening at the same time. For example, user actions and periodic polls, right? So they act on the same type of data. You want it to have a predictable state after those things occur. Yeah, so those are my guidance generally. There are other things like complex UI interactions. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it would belong to the to NgRx. It would be you'd better, in theory, behavior subject and a lot of Rx streams would work better if it's a complex interaction, but it's still like some sort of localized UI, but that spreads across maybe 3-4 components deep. You'd think that the behavior subject would be better, but sometimes it's more complex to work with the RxJS stream than with simple selectors. Again, use it at your own judgment. But I'm just saying that there are situations like this. Concurrent data modification, I already mentioned this, or frequently changing state. So the NgRx has the memorization. So it can benefit there, even though things might not particularly feel like they belong into the global state. So there are some of the wins that they can provide. Some prefer consistency as well. So sometimes mixing two, stateless approach and NgRx when you have a mostly NgRx. Some people prefer consistency and would err into one or the other. They would wait really, it has to be a really complicated problem before they bring in, because the rest of the application is with stateful services, or vice versa. A lot of NgRx they easily put in there just because for the team familiarity, they can move forward easier that way. Those are, I don't know, again, team trade-offs, which has to be decided on the team level. But
so I put on the, like, if you do decide, like, I want to keep this standard way, like they say you're using NgRx and you're going, okay, well, I really don't want to throw other services, behavior subject services in there. I kind of would like to keep the moniker of using NgRx. One of the things I like to focus on or lean towards is thinking about sharding my state, right, into different pieces, different segments. So I can say maybe there's data that I query from the back end that's, look up accounts or look up orders or something. And I have that in a part of my state that is defined as maybe data, right? And then there's maybe UI, like, is this drop down open or not? And I segment that in my state as that. So it's my state doesn't become this mashup of, back end data versus this. And I can kind of reason around that and then only update the segments of that state that need it. Because one of the things I think people get into is you start selecting from the store, right? And that store will stream out anytime there's a change, right? And so if you have a selector that contains multiple bits, any one of those bits might change and might cause your application to react, even though you might not need to do it because of that segment. So to have more control over that and work those scenarios, I think like that's something that I kind of lean into.
Selectors are great for actually preventing those updates, because you narrow it down and it will change up to a certain point and says, or further down, it didn't change, it didn't affect me. So then components won't retrigger the change detection for that. And they actually, I had a talk, it was one of my first talks actually at NG Talks last year, where I highlighted all the benefits of the selectors, and this was one of them. Somebody's asking what's your opinion on effects, right? And should those be used, right? Maybe, and I've seen that as well, right? So, well, I get the NgRx and the state management, but effects, I don't feel like they need it, right? Like sometimes people say that. The effects weren't part of the NgRx to begin with, right? But then they were added because they were addressing some problems. And one of the problems that I feel they address really well is what do you do with your asynchronous action that you started, for example, a service call, when another action of this type comes in. Say somebody double click the button, right? Do we send, if it's just a pure service-based approach, it's very easy to do service call something, and that would actually trigger multiple HTTP requests to the server. And then your server has to be, kind of independent and react nicely, or ignore the second one if it's the same one. But are you putting that load onto the server or on design of that server, or how you think it would work? It's a lot better to handle it yourself, right? So for example, this is where all those flattening strategies shine with concat map, right? Where you would do one after another, or exhaust map, for example. If you started already working with the server, did the request, any next action you would just ignore until it's busy getting a response back. So or merge map, where you parallel those. If those are by IDs, it's fine to do multiple requests at the same time. So the NgRx effects really help control the flow of the incoming actions, and I think this is where they shine. They have a lot more use cases. For example, it's possible to do this again. It's all possible to do this with the stateful services. For now, it involves a lot more code to do that. You'd have to manage subscriptions yourselves and all that. There are some plans with the NgRx team how to make it easier to have like a local state management as well. So stay tuned for that. that might be half a year to a year into the plans, but yeah. So there's that.
Nice. Very cool. What so our second part of it that we want to touch a little bit on is like thinking about how we can improve UX by using ngRx. Do you have some examples maybe you can talk about of like how we would use
Yes. Yes, I can definitely talk about the so one of the things that personally is not my favorite thing is a spinner, right? I when I see it, I feel like
I've never heard that before, so I love it.
Yes, I feel like why are we making users wait? So if I can avoid it, I try to. And usually with the spinner, right, we turn on before send request, you get a response back. We remove the spinner. But there are multiple techniques that we can take advantage of and show either less of it or not show at all. For example, I talk about, let me present this. Here is my screen here. I'll try not to present, so you won't see all my cool animations, which is unfortunate. Let me try to present it actually. Let me see. You see my slides here, or you see presenters' notes?
Can you try to make them progress? I see presenters' notes, but it's just black.
Yeah, okay. So. Yes. Well, let me then present a different screen. Sorry, I think I figured it out now. And let me present my other screen, this one.
So many screens.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. So let me present this right now. Here, you see a dog?
See the
yes.
dog?
There you go. There you go. So the optimistic thing we all work with interacted. For example, this is the Mike Ryan talk. So when we like things on Twitter, when we click the like button or Facebook or anywhere, you see it turn red immediately on the click, right? So, and it's not waiting for a server response to come back and approve it. What we do get with the server response here is a number that changed right now. So first I disabled I disabled all the network communication, and the app just reacts to it right away, immediately. It recognizes that there's a network error and rolls back to the previous state immediately as well. But the optimistic sort of reacts immediately. Optimistic UI, and I typically I do have like my 2-day workshops that I do every so often. Here's actually a plug. I do next one in Toronto in August 22nd, 23rd, like a 2-day NgRx workshop where I go from basics to all the advanced topics. But here's you see on the left and on the right when we add things to the cart, right? Do we wait for a response from a server to confirm that we added, or do we increase that number right away? So this is one of the optimistic approaches. And if the error happens, we can show a toast with the error and roll back that one number, decrease it. And there are actually quite a few gotchas with this. All right, like the APIs have to have like low failure rate. It doesn't have to be a critical path. For example, adding cart items fine, but not completing the purchase, right? That would be weird. And then response has to be also within 2 seconds. This is already going further into the psychology. This is the max of the user attention span. So if you revert back to the previous state after 2 seconds, it would be also a jarring experience. And the way it's done, it's quite interesting. This optimistic UI approach. The way you have your effect, usually you have this trigger action, right? For example, add item that triggers this whole effect, and then on success you usually put it right into the store, into the state, and there's an error usually handled somehow. So this is the typical way to make it optimistic. We add the item to the store with the first action, the one that triggers it, the add item one, right? And what we do is on success, we do nothing because it's already part of the state. And on the error, we pass usually the item ID so we can roll back the state to the previous one that we had. So, and that's almost all to it, right? A small change in the effect. Yeah, my animations are going through things. And then the reducer itself, right? So we add item immediately on the first trigger action, and on there we'll just remove it from it. So this was one of the tricks, I guess. The second one was to use local storage as well. So for example, you can put some of the data cached to the local storage. So when the next time you open up your app, when the next time the user opens up your app, you can pull some of the data from local storage. You can even put the timestamp as well. So for example, if it's too old, you don't pull it, and then it's also fine, right? But when you can use this, you can show a cached version of it for a brief second while you have a new API going for the fresh data. But the user won't see the spinner. They will see maybe cached version of it, and they'll see, again, not the spinner, but I prefer indeterminate progress bar, going around saying that things might still change. And but you're really showing something to the user. Yeah, that's
what I like about the cart example that you show is it shows how to do this UX experience, right? But the cart is a great example of like when you'd want to use application state, right? Because like in that example, you have this header up at the top that shows the total number of cart items. right? And that may be a component that's way up the component tree from where your actual line item component is that shows add to cart. So how do you say, I click add to cart and have that other thing part of your app update, right? And that's when this global state allows you to flow that through and have it react, right? That's right. Then you tie that in with NgRx and the effects and the service call. You kind of get everything like that.
Yeah, it's actually a great point you bring up, because when I first decided to create this workshop, I wanted to show how can NgRx be used, and I see a lot of, a typical example is a to-do application, but I feel like to-do application has a lot of local state, and it doesn't feel into, this is where you need it. So I was looking for example of the app that would be as simple as possible, so I can get all the concept across. Still familiar to most of the people. People use Amazon and online shopping, so shopping cart, it's all list of products. It's familiar items, and that one has 3 pages actually. First is the list of products. Second is when you click on one of the products, it's with the details, and third is the cart view itself. When you add things, you can remove them. So I feel like this was in my opinion, the best example to show where NgRx can be actually used, where it shines, and how to use many of the techniques. Yeah, one other technique was interesting. For example, when you open a list, when you get on the homepage, you get a list of products, but you typically don't fetch all the product details like description and things like that. However, when you click on the product itself, well, you can show the spinner, right, and then get all the description and stuff like that. But on the other hand, you can show the minimal information that you already have. You can use store as partial cache of your data, actually as a cache of partial data. For example, you can show already the title, the price, maybe the image, maybe in a low res format, and things like that. And then once the rest of the data arrives, you would update that data and put a description there as well. So you don't ask. There's no API specifically for the description, for example. You would still get all the product info, but you can merge it nicely with NgRx, and I feel it's a lot better user experience, in my opinion.
They're asking questions in the chat, and I know we're running out of time, and Justin's going to stop us in a minute. But just how do you deal with errors, or do you retry if it fails? Like if you do the optimistic, yeah, I know. Just we're out of time, you guys. These are such good questions, though. They're really good questions. We just need to pause the day so we can have a few more minutes. Sorry. It's a good question, though.
Error handling is an interesting topic. I have one article in Angular in depth on the error handling. Actually, it's on the entire, I call it a call state. How do you put
you have an article on error handling with the optimistic UI?
With optimistic UI, I have an article on optimistic UIs themselves. It's also.
Do you have an article on error handling combined with optimistic UI, or if not, will you write one for us, please?
I think in the optimistic UI, I mentioned how to handle the errors there. I think I do. Okay. If not, I'll try to add things, I guess. or again, ping me directly on Twitter. My DMs are open, or there are multiple ways, or ask questions in the articles. I try to answer them when I have time.
And you guys can tweet him. So the name, Alex Okrushko. You cannot forget that. And it's in the Twitter, or it's in the YouTube title. So it's spelled exactly the same on Twitter. And if you don't see it in his article, remind him. Your public can be very demanding, Alex, because this is a really good topic, and the questions are really good, but we are out of time. But I really want to know how you would handle that.
Are both those articles on Angular in depth? I'm hunting for the optimistic UI. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All my articles so far are Angular in depth. Big supporter.
Maybe Alyssa can find it during picks and drop it in the chat.
Yeah, we'll throw it up on the description.
Will do. Yeah.
They're talking about time traveling in DevTools, and I love it. And I think we should have a whole nother episode.
Spur to discussion. I love it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're at the top of the hour, so we better wrap up. let's do. Well, is there any last like really quick things to plug on NgRx at the very end, or should we get to picks? We good? Okay, well, we're good. We'll do picks. So, who has some picks for us today? Anybody? Mike does. Mike, I'm calling on you first.
Thanks, because I actually need to drop off. I have a meeting I need to run to. So Alex Castillo, and a lot of people know who he is, left Netflix and went to form his own company called Neurosity. I'll put a link into the show notes as well for the pick. But they just launched, and they're launching looks like a developer kit with a new brainwave scanning headpiece as well to be able to tap into that works over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth low energy. So very cool.
And there's a whole backstory there that we don't have time to get into, but it's really fascinating because I love Alex Castillo, and this company is actually really, really inspirational because he's using tech, and he left a really great, exciting job to do something to help people. And I think he's so inspirational. Huh?
And to do something he's quite passionate about. He loves what he does.
Yeah, and it's just great.
I believe we have an old episode too with him on there talking about this. So
can we get him back?
I think that's going to happen later soon.
For sure.
I miss him.
Who else has picked?
I need to drop off.
All right.
See you.
All right. Anybody else have picks? Raise your hand. I'll see it, and I'll call on you. Or
NgMai is coming up, and that's Jessalyn Yeen really believed in that and made it happen. And I know she's been working on it for a long time, and it's coming up like next week. So and the speaker lineup is amazing, and they've got the orangutans. And I'm just saying, Alex Okrushko, and also Connie, whoever's there at NgMai, please, if you can bring me an orangutan, I will pay you.
I'm trying to get one for my kids.
No, for me, Alex, for me. The kids don't even know. I need it. If you can get two, maybe the kids can have one. But if you can get one for me, give it to Mike Ryan, but let me know because I don't want him to keep it. I want to make sure it gets to me.
Like, just to clarify, you're talking about a monkey, right?
It's an orangutan.
It's a mascot.
I really want it. Jessalyn knows exactly what I'm talking about, and so I really hope
animal, I think, is what they're referring to.
I'm just imagining now Alex traveling with two monkeys instead of one monkey back on the plane. So that sounds safe.
I really want the And also, I'm really excited. I know we're running on. We're past time, but I'm very, very excited about Angular Denver, which is coming up. The whole entire Angular crew is going to be there in person, and we're going to have so much fun. And
AngularAir crew. I think you said Angular crew. Make sure it's Angular.
No, AngularAir. Well, I meant us, not them. We don't care. Yeah. It's us, y'all. We're going to be there.
But AngularAir is going to be there.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Any other picks?
Yes, I have. So one of my was NgMai, NG Malaysia, and NgMY, which is actually Saturday, Sunday coming up right now. And I'm flying tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, so it's very soon. But the other one, I wanted to call out one of the NgRx members. So he sometimes stays a little bit under the radar. Team Driver. Tim, he's team _Driver. I can actually send his Twitter there. So he does a phenomenal job with the NgRx team. He does a lot of day-to-day stuff. He does a lot of bug triaging. He does a lot of Gitter communications. He writes a lot. He contributes a lot. NgRx will definitely not be there without him. So, and he's not a very frequent conference. He doesn't show up too much in the conference.
Why? Because I see him on Twitter all the time, and all my friends love that guy, and I never see him. Why?
He's amazing. I love that guy. So
Tim, I know you're watching because I see you in the chat. You need to show your face. We want to see you. Come and hang out with us.
Yeah, so definitely follow him on Twitter. He outputs great content. Yeah, so this is the shout out for him because I feel he's under, I don't know, stays under radar a little bit sometimes. So
can you get him? Can you get him like next time you come on the show? Bring him or get him to come to a conference because I keep hearing this name and I keep seeing this guy on Twitter, but I have not. I need to see.
Yes, it'd have to be his choices.
Tell him we said don't be shy. Tim,
Yeah.
I'll just tell him. Tim, don't be shy. We're very
There you
friendly.
go.
Don't bite.
Yep. So there it is.
All right.
I will pronounce the last name correctly because
We know who Tim is.
yeah.
All right. Well, since we're on the subject of thank yous, Alex, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing and doing this episode. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. That's a wrap. We'll catch you next time.
See you.
Bye.